I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this video took like 53 minutes to record and you'll see my downward spiral as it goes along. Enjoy. Ever since the Ultimate Guide came out, a theory called StitchlineGames sparked, and since then it has grown more than I ever thought it would, especially since it was never even implied by the Ultimate Guide in the first place. For those who don't know, StitchlineGames is a theory that all the Fazbear Fright's Stitch Wraith epilogues and all the stories that connect to them take place in the game's timeline. There's not really much evidence for it in my opinion, and to be honest, all of it is pretty defunct. And in this video I'm going to start by going over all the supposed evidence for StitchlineGames and talk about why it doesn't really confirm it at all, and after that I'm going to be going over every single problem with the theory as a whole. I'd like to preface this by saying that I do not think the theory is impossible, I just think it's nonsensical. And what I mean by that is, I don't judge people for believing it, but if it was canon, it would solve like two things and then wreck everything else the series tells us. I mean, if it is canon, I accept it and make up random to make it fit and then get judged for it, and then I just cope with the fact that FNaF lore sucks now. But I'd eventually get over it. I mean, only if StitchlineGames is canon. Otherwise, I still like the lore, but I mean, okay, if the Stitch Wraith itself were to show up in the games at some point, then I wouldn't just be like, it's the game Stitch Wraith. But when it comes to another character, I think that argument is perfectly valid, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Anyways, it's now time. I talked about StitchlineGames in my You're the Band video a bit, but it deserves a video on its own. So this has been a long time coming, and now let's get started. StitchlineGames originated from the Five Nights at Freddy's Ultimate Guidebook, the third installment of the Freddy Files, a series of guidebooks explaining the gameplay mechanics and the basics behind the FNaF games, including Easter eggs and briefly mentioning popular fan theories. In the Fazbear Frights chapter of the book, it is said that Larson got the puppet from an evidence bag coming from the wreckage of the FNAF 6 fire, and says that Henry's plan doesn't seem to have worked as intended. On another page, it claims that the poster on the Scrap Trap alleyway screen in FNAF 6 is similar to Heracles Hospital from the Man Room 180. But here's the problem with this. This does not confirm anything. In Epilogue 5, we get information on the aforementioned fire, claiming that it was tied to one of the founders of Fazbear Entertainment, and that the fire had never been solved. This is blatantly spelling out for us that the fire is the FNAF 6 location, but when the Ultimate Guide confirms something that we already know, it somehow means these stories are in the games? What sense does that make? Multiple similar events happen in different FNAF universes. Saying the Ultimate Guide confirms StitchlineGames because it says FNAF 6 happens in the Stitchline is like saying the novel trilogy universe happens in the games because of Molten MCI, or William Afton existing and being Springtrap, or the missing children incident happening in the first place, but we know that not to be the case. So no, the Ultimate Guide doesn't confirm or even imply StitchlineGames. And even if that was what it was trying to say, the Freddy Files series is basically known for being a mess of mistakes. People believe that the Ultimate Guide would be different because the description claimed we would be getting information from the Fazbear Entertainment archives. That led people to believe that this book would give us reliable answers. But as it turns out, the information from the Fazbear Entertainment archives is literally just its own chapter, giving us recipes and transcripts from the games. But even after the one thing that led us to believe the book would be valid was actually debunked, people kept believing it. But the Ultimate Guide suffers from the same problem as the other two Freddy Files books. It's a mess of mistakes. I've already made an entire video on the nearly 50 mistakes this book has that I noticed, and I didn't even mention all of the mistakes I noticed, but one of my favorite ones to bring up is the fact that this book claims that it's a fact that both Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie help the kids. Shadow Freddy, though, is literally confirmed to be evil, and Shadow Bonnie, well, I believe Shadow Bonnie to indeed be helping the kids, later in the Ultimate Guide, in this same book, it says that Shadow Bonnie wants to kill us to harvest more remnant. So let me get this straight. Shadow Bonnie wants to help us set spirits free. So he kills us and traps our soul. Excuse me. What? Anyway, as I said before, the book also says that the poster on Scrap Trap's FNAF 6 alleyway screen resembles Heracles Hospital. Somehow people think this implies StitchlineGames, which I don't understand. But guys, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret, okay? This is an opera. The text on the poster literally says One Night at the Opera, probably a reference to the series title of Five Nights at Freddy's, while also giving a reference to like Phantom of the Opera or something, or just being a regular opera, I don't know. The funnier thing, though, is that this building doesn't even match how Heracles Hospital is described in the Man in Room 1-80. The opera building has two lion statues on either side of the entrance, but Heracles Hospital has just one statue of Cerberus, the three-headed dog guard of the underworld. You know, hell, which is likely meant to reference the fact that this is an Ultimate Custom Night story, and William is in his own, like, personal hell thing. I don't understand how people believe this. Like, seriously, they could not be more different. It's honestly stuff like this that really tells me that we should not trust the Ultimate Guide. Sure, it's not like it gets nothing right, but for the most part, that's just in the fan theory section or just common knowledge. But should the Ultimate Guide be taken into account when conducting theories? Absolutely not. The Ultimate Guide came out a little under 2 weeks before Security Breach, and somehow that also has stuff that makes people believe in StitchlineGames, and that is the appearance of the snack space from Into the Pit and Room for One More, and arcade machines with references to Fazbear Fright's characters like Fetch, Out of Stock, 1:35 AM, and Bunny Call. The issue here is that the novel trilogy books are referenced as well. Theodore, Ella, and Stanley are also on the arcades, not to mention all the Twisted Wolf references in previous games. If the Fazbear Frights references prove Stitchline is in the games, well damn, I guess the novel trilogy is in the games too. Except that literally does not work, obviously. The next piece of supposed evidence comes from Scott Cawthon himself. When Fazbear Frights was first announced, Scott said that some stories would be tied directly to the games, and some wouldn't. The issue here is that there are some stories that don't have any connection to the Stitchline and would potentially fit cleanly in the game universe. And yeah, it would be a bit random if the stories that weren't focused on were the ones in the games, but the difference is that these stories actually don't conflict with the games, while the Stitchline very much does, as I'll go over a bit later. Plus, Scott also said that Fazbear Frights would fill in blanks from the past, but the Stitchline literally entirely takes place after the events of FNaF 6. Since Fazbear Frights was announced before Help Wanted came out, that doesn't really count. And yeah, Fazbear Frights 100% has connections to the future of the games, but wouldn't it make more sense for the more important stories to hint at what we'll see in the future while simultaneously giving us answers to things like Remnant and how possession works and stuff, rather than just entirely taking place in the future of the games? I don't know, that's just the way I see it. And finally, we have Tales from the Pizzaplex. When it was first announced, Tales was confirmed to take place in the game's timeline, and the content of some stories 100% confirmed that. But a lot of people also strongly believe that the Tales from the Pizzaplex is in the Stitchline, mainly because of Eleanor being the overarching enemy of Frailty, as well as connections between Lally's Game and Help Wanted to some of the visions Larson has in the final epilogue. First of all, Frailty. Frailty is about a girl named Jessica who was a victim of Eleanor, which confirms that Eleanor does exist in the game universe, or at least some variant of her. In Security Breach Fury's Rage, towards the end of Vanny's level, we see a tank in the background of an Eleanor-shaped figure, like Baby, but slimmer. This confirmed the existence of Eleanor in the games over a year ago, but somehow when Frailty tells us the same thing, it means StitchlineGames must be canon. Yeah, that does not make sense. It's kind of similar to the thing about FNaF 6 happening in the Stitchline from earlier. It's just confirming something that we literally already knew, and it doesn't confirm StitchlineGames at all. Despite what a lot of people say, Eleanor is very clearly meant to represent Circus Baby, or Elizabeth in some sort of new body. It is made very clear in the Stitchline that Eleanor is not possessed by a spirit, but just pure agony, but her actions and design do connect her to Circus Baby. For example, being a character who manipulates people to get them to do what she wants and then stealing their identity, causing their bodies to basically crumble. Plus, Eleanor's design is just Circus Baby but slim and with a giraffe neck. And as for the other two arguments, I've never really understood. The Stitchline takes place in the future after the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place has burned down, but given the fact that there are no mentions of the Pizzaplex, Help Wanted game, FNaF video games, or the Fazbear Funtime service, it seems like either these stories aren't in the games or they don't take place that far in the future, or both. Even if the Stitchline was in the games, the visions in the final epilogue can't have been from Lally's Game or Help Wanted, because they would take place in the future, and I severely doubt Eleanor can time travel. Or, well, she kinda can, but only through the altering of memories, which isn't really time travel, and memories are also, obviously, always regarding the past. That's what a memory is. And Lally's Game and Haps are in the future, so that goes against that point. And that's all the supposed evidence for StitchlineGames completely combated. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe.
Oh,
We still have to combat the theory itself, don't we? Alright, I guess so. But this may take a while, because there's a lot to talk about. Yeah, that's why this theory is bad, because it takes so long to go over all of it. I've just completed page 3. That was page 3 of the script, guys. And I'm just now starting to talk about the evidence against it. And I have 6 more pages to go through. Okay, let's not waste any time. We need to keep going. Just a warning, most of the stuff I'm going to be talking about here are things that I've talked about in previous videos, but there's also some stuff I found out about recently, so yeah. We're going to be going over all of this in sections because it just helps me organize the video better. So, first off, let's talk about Into the Pit. Being the first Phasma Frights Stitchline story and the first Phasma Frights story overall, it's only right to start with Into the Pit. The first issue with StitchlineGames here is literally the basic premise of the story. In the story, Oswald goes back in time to 1985 a few times until he comes back one day and finds people screaming and running away, and he's led to a back room where he sees 6 dead children lined up against the wall. But literally everything I just said in that sentence contradicts what happens in the game's timeline. In Into the Pit, the incident we see is meant to represent the Phasma Frights Stitchline missing children incident, but the events we actually see are more so matching with the Save Them murders from FNaF 2. I'm not going to sit here and say that this is a parallel to something else, so therefore not true, but the things that make it parallel Save Them do contradict StitchlineGames. But before we talk about that, I want to briefly mention something else in Into the Pit. I recently made a video going over some details in the story that I noticed while reading it for the second time, and one of those details especially caught my eye. In Into the Pit, Mike's favorite movie is Back to the Future, and he even wears a Back to the Future shirt in one of the scenes. Reading the story actually made me really want to go back and watch the Back to the Future movies for the first time in literally years, and I love the first one and the second one. I haven't watched the third one yet, but I'm going to soon. But Back to the Future released on July 3rd of 1985. Thinking about the fact that of all things, Back to the Future is what's going to contradict StitchlineGames, I love the movies even more, because July 3rd of 1985. Think about that. Into the Pit takes place in the summer of 1985, so probably not too long after the Back to the Future movie came out. The problem is that Back to the Future was released prior to the incident, but in the games, the missing children incident was on June 26th. That means that even if the missing children incident was in 1985, it was before Back to the Future. The interesting thing is that Into the Pit's time of the missing children incident, July of 1985, actually perfectly matches with the incident in the novel trilogy, July of 1985. So these two universes, the Phasma Frights universe and the novel trilogy universe, both have the missing children incident take place in July of 1985. If these two universes share the same year and month of the missing children incident, but don't share the same month of it as the games do, then who's to say that they really also share the same year? The missing children incident being in 1985 to me makes sense, though I don't believe it, but I'm just pointing this out to say that it doesn't really have to be. But now going back to what I was saying earlier, people in Into the Pit saw the bodies, or at least some people did. Otherwise, why would anyone be running and screaming? Some people say that this is a warped memory and people are just following what is coursing through Oswald's mind, but there's 2 problems with that. One, I see a lot of people saying that Into the Pit is a warped memory, but there's nothing that suggests that literally at all. And 2, people are screaming before Oswald sees the bodies, and even if they hadn't been, Oswald isn't all that scared. Or at least he's brave enough that he literally goes towards the bodies while everyone else runs away. There's also the fact that Into the Pit shows 6 victims when in the missing children incident there's only 5. And one of the bigger problems that stems from this story is the fact that all of these children are lined up against the wall. Now, you may not think that this is an issue on its own, but it's actually a huge issue. We know that Afton stuffed the kids. Okay, some people believe that the puppet did because of Give Gifts, Give Life, but to me it's really questionable whether or not the FNaF 2 minigames, for the most part, specifically Give Gifts, Give Life and the Foxy Go 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 minigame, were literal or just metaphorical to give us a sense of what happens while not showing what literally does. It seems more likely that rather than the puppet stuffing the kids, she just helped guide their souls. Not necessarily into the suits because spirits possess animatronics on their own, but just to help them actually control the robots, since as she says in Ultimate Custom Night,
"The others are like animals, but I am very aware."
So she may help the kids, but she does not stuff them into the suits. That was 100% William. Our first clue comes from the basic idea that William literally kills the kids to experiment with the concept of possession. He sees the way Charlotte possesses the puppet and wants to experiment with that concept. That's why he wants to make Remnant to experiment with the idea of immortality by using soul metal. Why exactly would he think that just killing the kids is enough? No, the novel trilogy shows that the kids were stuffed by William. Some may argue that this is in a universe where the puppet didn't exist, but why would William do anything differently here? It's also stated in the book that the day Michael Brooks was killed, before he actually gets captured, the animatronics go haywire because they were possessed. This shows that not only were the kids stuffed as they were killed, they were possessed at different times, which contradicts the puppet stuffing them at the same time. But furthermore, the kids didn't just die and get stuffed into the suits, they were stuffed in the suits, and that is what kills them. How do we know? Well, it's flat out told to us in the Silver Eyes. And how do we know that that's what happens in the games too? Simply because there's no reason it can't, and Phone Guy tells us so on night 1 of FNaF 1.
They'll most likely see you as a metal endoskeleton without its costume on. Now, since that's against the rules here at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, they'll probably try to forcefully stuff you inside a Freddy Fazbear suit. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if the suits themselves weren't filled with cross beams, wires, and animatronic devices, especially around the facial area. So you can imagine how having your head forcibly pressed inside one of those could cause a bit of discomfort and death. The only parts of you that would likely see the light of day again would be your eyeballs and teeth that pop out the front of the mask.
But other things also tell us that William not only stuffed the kids, but stuffed them separately, and like I just said, the stuffing is what kills them. Pizza Party in FNaF VR shows Chica and Bonnie with party hats next to them, showing that they are now stuffed, but Foxy doesn't have one, and we are playing as Gabriel, aka Freddy. And Toy Chica the High School Years, a representation of William killing the kids, shows Toy Chica luring, stuffing, and killing the animatronics all separately. So what does this have to do with Into the Pit? Well, the fact that the people are running and screaming indicates that people saw the bodies, and in the games, William couldn't be charged for the murders because they couldn't find the bodies, and therefore they couldn't really prove that the children were dead, and that means they couldn't charge William with anything because they couldn't prove that he did anything to the kids. Into the Pit contradicts that, because it shows that people see the bodies, meaning that the police would obviously know that the kids are dead. But it also shows that the kids are all grouped together, lined up against the wall, not in the animatronics. But in the games, the kids were never grouped together outside of the suits. They were stuffed as they were killed, or rather, killed as they were stuffed. As I mentioned before, some people argue that Into the Pit is just a warped memory, and none of this is actually accurate to the MCI of Fazbear Frights. But not only is there no evidence to suggest that, it's actually confirmed that this is an accurate representation of the MCI with our next topic of discussion, You're the Band. You're the Band is considered by many to not be canon to the Stitchline, but some things actually say otherwise. The Shadow is the main antagonist in the story, and the Shadow in the Stitchline is Eleanor. Or at least, I think it is. Some people seem to think it's someone else, but I'm pretty sure it is Eleanor. Partially because not only is the Shadow in the story, but Timmy's bedroom from the story appears in the final epilogue as one of the memories where Larson fights Eleanor, meaning that You're the Band, well, it happens in the Stitchline and Eleanor was responsible. For reference, these memories are stories that Eleanor was responsible for. Out of Stock, 1:35 a.m., Step Closer, Dance With Me, The Man in Room 180, which is something we'll talk about in a bit, Blackbird, Hide and Seek, and of course, You're the Band. Since Eleanor in the Stitchline is responsible for You're the Band, that means You're the Band is in the Stitchline as well. And You're the Band also has a bunch of stuff preventing it from being in the game's timeline, and one of those things is that it actually confirms what Into the Pit tells us. People found the bodies. When asked about what he's talking about when he mentions the dead kids, Timmy outright says, they found them lined up against the wall. Not only does Timmy say people found the kids, matching me Into the Pit, he also says that they were found lined up against the wall. Again, just like we see in Into the Pit. Notice how he says they found them against the wall, and not in the animatronics. It's pretty well established at this point that Fazbear Entertainment did find the missing children's bodies in the animatronics and covered it up, which I talked about in the video before. But You're the Band says that the bodies were lined up against the wall, not in the suits. Meaning, even if he were talking about Fazbear Entertainment rather than the police or something, the kids weren't stuffed in the suits, which contradicts the games. Something else we see in You're the Band is the appearance of a character named Mike, who is a security guard at the old abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This is clearly a stand-in for Michael Afton, or under StitchlineGames, is Michael Afton. But Mike here is also in his early 20s, and also looks to be like a young college student. But this takes place in 2015, which we know since it's 30 years after the missing children incident, if you can really call it that. I just call it that so so that you guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, I don't really know how else to describe it other than missing children incident, but just keep in mind, in the Stitchline, it's really not a missing children incident at all. It's more of a dead children incident. But missing children incident is the best way I could describe it. I don't know why I'm explaining this. You guys probably get it already. I'm sorry. What is wrong with me? By this point, Michael Afton would be 46 to 48 years old. Twice as old as he is in You're the Band. And yeah, Remnant heals Michael's body after dislocation. But it's not like Remnant is the fountain of youth or anything. Or the goddamn Lazarus pit. William in the Silver Eyes had died to a springlock failure before, but had come back to life with the help of Remnant, healing him. But he still did have the scars from the springlock failure. His skin was healed, but he still had the scars, and he still aged. Remnant doesn't make you look younger, it just heals you, that's all. So Mike being in his early 20s in You're the Band also contradicts StitchlineGames. You're the Band is genuinely a really great story, and it makes it better for me that it debunks StitchlineGames, because I really don't like the randomness of Andrew being in the story of the games, yet never being mentioned until now. That's why I don't like StitchlineGames as a story, but as a theory it's honestly a lot worse in my opinion. And You're the Band really has a lot that goes against StitchlineGames too. In the Silver Eyes, we are shown that William is springlocked in 1995. If we also apply this to the games, cool, that makes a lot of sense. But before getting springlocked, William destroys the animatronics, melts the endos, and puts them into the fun times. Since they aren't free yet, their agony stays behind until Happy's Day eventually happens, but basically the spirits don't possess the suits anymore. All that's left behind in the shells is the remaining tiny fragments of the spirits, which are what get William killed. But in You're the Band, the Freddy animatronic is still possessed by the spirit of Gabriel, and the Freddy, Bunny, and Chica animatronics are not destroyed and are still intact. These two things do not match. The man in room 1280 or 1280, 1280, whatever the hell you call it. I call it 1280. I don't know what you guys call it. Maybe I'm triggering you guys by calling it 1280. Anyway, the man in room 1280, despite being a bit repetitive, is one of the more popular Phasma Fright stories, and for good reason. A lot of the stories that expand on one specific FNaF game are the more popular ones, such as You're the Band, What We Found, Blackbird, and some others are some of the most popular. The Man in Room 1280 is no exception. This story is about Ultimate Custom Night, the version taking place in the Stitchline, and shows the outside world's reaction to it. All they see is a humanoid-looking figure, a figure with a head, a torso, 2 arms, 2 legs, but his body didn't look like a human's in any way anymore. His body was completely burned to a crisp, and in his brain there were 2 different signals indicating 2 different entities occupying the body. That's kind of the basic premise of the Man in Room 1280 as a story, but this actually has a few issues if StitchlineGames is to be canon. First of all, the thing about William being a figure with a head, torso, 2 arms, and 2 legs isn't just something I made up, it's literally something that's said in the book, or something along those lines. But it is explicitly said that he has 2 arms. But if this truly is in the games, this doesn't work, because in FNaF 6 in the games, William only has 1 arm. The other arm is gone with just a sharpened bone sticking out. So if this is right after FNaF 6 and is specifically canon to the games, he should only have 1 arm, not 2. A lot of people say it's just because Afton is inconsistent, but here's the thing. No, he's not. The only inconsistent thing about Afton is his skeleton, and that's only because it's a whole new model. Scraptrap looking different to Springtrap is on purpose, as it's supposed to show that after the fire, William repaired himself with another suit. He's not inconsistent. You're telling me William regained an entire arm after burning? That makes no sense. And it's not like he regrew it because of Remnant, because if that was the case, then his body would be healed too. It would still be damaged, but it wouldn't be burned to a crisp. It's also more likely that Afton is dead at this point rather than still being alive, at least in the game's timeline, which contradicts the fact that he's alive in this story. Considering everything we see in this series, would it really be unbelievable to assume the one you should not have killed could just torture William while he's dead? They do not need to revive him, and even if they did, revival is only a thing with Remnant, in which case Afton's body would still be healed. But there's more. Remember when I said that there are 2 entities in William's brain? One of them 100% has to be William. This is not even this isn't even up for debate. If William wasn't one of these signals, then he's not even here. And therefore this isn't Ultimate Custom Night, it's Ultimate Boring Bozos. But yeah, there are only 2 signals. One of these signals also has to be Andrew, since he's obviously the one responsible for the story. We also know Eleanor is involved here, and I used to say that contradicts the fact that there are only 2 brainwaves, but technically Eleanor is just Agony and probably wouldn't have her own brainwave anyway, so that also wouldn't really go against StitchlineGames, but would just mean this story is inconsistent. So the 2 brainwaves are Andrew and William, but the issue is that we know of someone else in the games who is connected to Ultimate Custom Night: Cassidy. Most people who believe StitchlineGames just throw Cassidy completely out of Ultimate Custom Night. The problem with that is that Cassidy has been confirmed to be in Ultimate Custom Night, and if she is, then that means StitchlineGames can't be true. Andrew in the Stitchline is the vengeful spirit, and there are 2 signals in Afton's brain, one being Andrew and one being William. If StitchlineGames is true, then there should be 3, or 4 actually, because of Old Maid Consequences. But how is Cassidy confirmed to be in Ultimate Custom Night, I hear you asking? Well, it goes back to Security Breach's minigame of Princess Quest. The princess in Princess Quest is Cassidy, and the design of her and some stuff we see in the minigames implies that Cassidy is Golden Freddy, which to me is completely clear at this point, and I've already made a video specifically dedicated to Golden Freddy, so go check that out if you haven't already. At the end of Princess Quest 2, after doing everything Old Man Consequences tells us to do, we meet him in Cassidy's bedroom, and he tells her that the task is done and to go to sleep. But instead of listening, Cassidy persists and continues to pursue William in Ultimate Custom Night. If you have Old Man Consequences on 1 difficulty and no one else in the game, and you catch his fish, what he always prompts you to do, we meet him at the Red Lake, and he tells us to rest and to not do anything further. But in the background of this minigame, we hear William screaming. If he's nowhere in this minigame, where is he that we can hear him? He's in the Red Lake. The fact that Old Man Consequences, when telling you to rest, tells you to sit with him for a while indicates that he doesn't want you going into the lake, but just to stay here. But if William is in the lake and Old Man Consequences doesn't want you going in, but we do anyway, it shows that we are pursuing William. These 2 scenes are identical. They are the same. It shows that Cassidy is at the very least partially responsible for Ultimate Custom Night. And as I said, that contradicts the man in room 1280. Hey guys, Evan from editing here. It's also like 11:20 p.m. so I'm a bit quieter, but so basically I'm in a VC with some people right now, and we're talking about StitchlineGames and stuff. And one thing someone mentioned that I remembered in hindsight, and I knew about this evidence, but I forgot to mention it in the video, so I'm adding it in here. In Ultimate Custom Night, the Vengeful Spirit's voice is described as being well, it's not described as being, we can hear it as being like softer and more feminine, but in Epilogue 4, I think it was, Andrew's voice is described as being rough, meaning that he really can't be the Vengeful Spirit. And as I said, since there's only 2 brainwaves in William's head, then that means they can't be 2 separate people if StitchlineGames were canon, meaning that StitchlineGames can't be canon. So yeah, there's that. Now let's move on. Miscellaneous. While writing this script, literally everything that I said up until this point, I wrote just off the top of my head. That just shows how flawed StitchlineGames is. That I could think of this much without asking anyone or looking at old videos where I talked about StitchlineGames. But for this section of the video, I'm going to go over miscellaneous information that either isn't related to the other topics I've talked about, or that I remembered only from looking at other video scripts and stuff. And I'll be going over each bit very briefly because some of it isn't incredible evidence, but it's still worth mentioning, and also because this video is getting really long, and some stuff doesn't really need any elaboration. By the time of the New Kid story, Andrew is likely already inside the Stitch Wraith, meaning Kelsey is an Andrew, so these are 2 different spirits that inhabited the same Golden Freddy. But in the 4th epilogue, Andrew claims to have had no one to talk to about his problems. As I talked about, Cassidy is Golden Freddy, and the bite victim kinda has to be too. If StitchlineGames are true, Andrew would have had them to talk to. The fact that he has no one doesn't bode well for StitchlineGames. I don't really understand the mindset that the puppet was in the FNaF 6 location, taken to an evidence locker, taken by Larson, put into the Afton amalgamation, then drowned in a lake, and somehow, and for no reason at all, ended up back under FNaF 6. How? How does that... Guys, yeah, what? How? Cassidy was blatantly confirmed by Scott to be an important character. Happy's Day is 100% for the bite victim. So I fail to see anything that Cassidy actually does under StitchlineGames that is important. Really, all she ever does under StitchlineGames doesn't have anything to even do with herself, but more so with the bite victim. So how would that make a good movie dedicated to Cassidy? Because remember, that was meant to be that was like one of the intended scripts for the FNaF movie. It was like Cassidy being the main character, and somehow obviously that means that she's like one of the most important characters in the series. Under StitchlineGames, what the hell does she do? And like what she does do, it's mostly to do with the bite victim. So why would a Cassidy-centered movie work if it has nothing to do with Cassidy's character? In the first Tales from the Pizzaplex epilogue, we get zero mention of the hole in the FNAF 6 location. Something I thought was weird at first, and then started actually thinking about more when Krakoa brought it up to me. When we're going down into the hole during the Afton ending, Freddy says that someone, a girl, almost definitely Vanny, forced him to clear the path. Her goal is to rebuild William? I can't speak this video, guys. This recording has been like 45 minutes long, and when I say like 45 minutes long, I mean exactly 45 minutes and 30 seconds on the dot right now. So, I think I'm going delirious at this point. Her goal is to rebuild William, so what does this path lead to that she needs to get to? William. His body's still down here, and it was trapped. The hole wasn't there before. She needed Freddy to make the hole, and then she combines William's original body with the endoskeleton from the first Tales epilogue. If Vanny needs Freddy to clear the path, what is she clearing the path to if not William? It has to be him. That might be debunked by epilogue 2, I don't really know because I'm staying clear of spoilers, but by the time this video goes out, the book is out today, so I guess I'll find out. But generally, William being trapped under FNAF 6 by the time Vanny goes down to fix him contradicts the man in room 180 where William's body was in a hospital, not to mention it blew up. Shadow Bunny is the main antagonist in Hide and Seek, which takes place in modern day. Shadow Bunny in the story is made from Toby's anger, and this story takes place in the Stitchline. Shadow Bunny in the games existed at the latest by FNAF 2. So him being created in modern day makes absolutely no sense. Something else that doesn't make sense is the fact that there are even Freddy Fazbear's Pizza locations open during modern day. The only one that was FNAF 6, and that was by Henry only. After that, there was only the Pizzaplex, or the Pizzaplexes, so how are there modern day Freddy's locations? There shouldn't be. And what makes that even weirder is that in You're the Band, Sylvia says that Freddy's has been gone since the incident 30 years before. In this universe, Freddy's closed after the missing children incident and never started back up again. But at some point, Circus Baby's Pizza World opens up as we see in Dance With Me, and it's also open for more than just one day, which also contradicts what happens in the games. But both of these things also line up exactly with the Silver Eyes trilogy, where the missing children incident gets Freddy shut down and transformed into another building by 1985, which in the Stitchline by 1985 is Flo's Fabulous Eatery, but the FNAF 1 location is the original Freddy's building, but in the Stitchline, that building is transformed into numerous different establishments by different owners. After the missing children incident, Fazbear Entertainment never gets it back. Plus the Circus Baby Pizza World opening up and staying open for more than one day, unlike the games. Yeah, there's that. And also that matches up with the fourth closet where, Circus Baby's Pizza World opens up and is open for more than one day. Like, I just said it, so yeah, I don't know why I'm explaining again. And all of these contradicting elements of the Stitchline to the games really show that while StitchlineGames would solve some things, like who the one you should not have killed is, how Ultimate Custom Night works, when the missing children incident happens, despite all of that, if it were true, it would contradict everything that has been laid out for us since FNAF 1. If StitchlineGames is canon, it ruins everything. Could it be canon? Maybe, but it would 100% destroy the fabric of the storylines in all of FNAF. And while the lore is kinda complicated, it's never inconsistent, and at least not when it comes to the actual story parts, unless StitchlineGames is true. This video ended up being more than a 9-page script, which is like twice as long as my typical theory video, so I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and even if you didn't agree with me, hopefully you guys realize that I put a lot of work in this video, and honestly, I probably forgot to mention some stuff in this video, and I also probably didn't really edit it that much, because, it's 10:42 p.m. right now, and I have school tomorrow, and I just spent 52 minutes recording in this video, so I'll edit it a little bit, but probably not that much. And the video on StitchlineGames, I feel like you don't need that much to edit in. It'll probably, for the most part, just be gameplay in the background. I don't know why I'm explaining this after the whole video's gone by. It doesn't really matter that much to edit theory videos, because it's a theory video. I don't think many people really pay attention to the screen. People listen to theory videos more like they listen to like podcasts or something. They just have it on in the background while it's more so something that you listen to rather than something you actually watch, I guess. You know? I don't know why I'm still explaining this. But anyway, if you still believe StitchlineGames after watching this video, I don't know why, but to each their own. As I said before, HAPS, the second Tales from the Pizza Box book, and the Security Breach files come out the day this video comes out, and I'll be making 4 separate summary videos, one for each story in HAPS, and I'll be making some additional videos afterwards, and I'll also be making a video on the Security Breach files book. After all the summaries, though. I'm also streaming the Hello Neighbor 2 Steam demo today, so keep an eye out for that. But I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please do leave a like and subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you all later. Bye, guys.